you still have to know what they're doing.
Right.
Just because they're an expert doesn't mean you don't have that communication, because you become an expert to find experts
Right.
by having that communication now back and forth.
Welcome to Syncronized, the podcast that drives MSP growth from startup to scale up. In each episode, we dive into the topics that matter most to IT providers, such as automation, AI, service delivery, and profitability. Join us as we engage with experts and gain hands-on insights and practical advice you can directly apply to propel your business forward. Let's dive in.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Synchronized. We've got a really fun kind of special topic and format to today's conversation. I'm really excited to be joined by Janice Mahlmann, who's the CEO at August eTech, for a conversation about transitioning kind of from the back office up to the boardroom, if you will. It's making the jump from being a technical leader within an MSP or IT organization to becoming that CEO and more that executive business leader. Janice, you've done a lot of all this, so I think we've got the right person to chat with about kind of making this transition. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join us here on Synchronized.
Well, thank you for having me. It's going to be really exciting. I think it's going to be a fun chat, and I look forward to discussing this with you.
I'm excited to dive in. Before we get to the good stuff, just talk a little bit about your background, your experience, and about August eTech so our audience can get a sense of who you are.
Sure. I started out as a network engineer, and I went into a database administration. I ended up my corporate career working for a UK company, and I headed up the IT department for the UK company, and they were starting here in the US. So I worked with HR and sales and all these different departments to help the company. Whoa. We'll do that to help the company start up in the US. And so I was very excited about that because I got an opportunity to learn all these things about starting up a company.
Right.
And I spent about 3 years with them. And I said, well, why don't I start my own company? Because I've already helped a company start up here in the US. And that's what I did. So I started the company, August eTech. We are an MSP. We've been around for about it's going to be 24 years in August. And we have grown essentially from being, a single person MSP to growing up to where we are at now, which is about 25 employees, including some contractors and consultants. And I think the key is, we keep reinventing, and you have to keep up with the times. And one of the things that we just launched actually in April was our MSSP services, which is the secure side of MSP. And that's part of what we're going to be discussing about learning and going that next step and taking your technical expertise and becoming the business person who needs to lead things moving forward.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you for the background and context. And clearly you've kind of sat in all of the chairs that we're going to talk about here. So it'll be a fun, we'll get to navigate some of your own journey while we offer some higher level advice for our audience as well. So the way we're going to approach this, we've almost got, I think, kind of 5 core pillars or steps to walk through and think about as you make this transition. And look, there's a lot of ways that you could find yourself in this situation, right? So you just described one path, which is, hey, I've been doing this for a while. I've gotten some exposure to the business side of it. I think I could have a run at this and maybe stand something up on my own. Maybe you're in a different situation where you've got some executive leadership within an org that is retiring or stepping back from the business, or maybe there's a sale or a transaction of some kind that gives you an opportunity to step up into more of that leadership role on the business side. So different ways that you could potentially get into this side of the house, but it's very different, right? Very different kind of understanding at a business and board level, how to run and operationalize and grow something, as opposed to your more traditional problem solving, stuff breaks and we got to fix it and we're building process and automation, interfacing more with the machines perhaps than with the humans. So on our first of kind of 5 pillars here that we're going to talk about is this idea of shifting that mindset, right? You've said to me, hey, you can't just be the problem solver anymore when you're transitioning to that CEO role. You really need to become the strategic thinker. Take us through kind of what that means to you and unpack maybe what are some of the day-to-day differences in that sort of shift in mindset as one of the first things you're going to have to be mindful of stepping onto more of the business side of the house?
Yeah, sure. So when you're a small MSP, you're still doing a lot of things yourself. You might be a solo MSP for a while and you're doing all the technical stuff yourself. And so you're really not thinking about, payroll or employees because you just don't have it. You're getting paid and that's your contractor, that's your pay, or, you have an LLC or an S Corp, whatever it might be. And then you get to a point where you are growing and you're like, I need to add one or two people. Most MSP, and I'm sure most small businesses, especially in technology, will start with contractors. Oh, I'm going to start with a contractor and I'm going to bring them on. And you start that mindset of, okay, now I need to make sure that I give them projects to do. So I'm not going to be doing this technical part. So you start having to separate that technical part from actually backing away and doing a little bit more business. All right, I have a contractor now. I've got to pay them now. How do I pay them? Oh, now I'm getting, all these legalese things saying, is your contractor really a contractor? Or are they not a full-time employee? And then you start going, okay, you know what? I have more work. I think I actually need full-time employees. As soon as you start getting those full-time employees, you have to start thinking about the business side of it more than the actual technical part of it. And not to say you can't think about the technical part, you have to, because you have to still be part of it. Because the only way that you're going to run a technical business is if you stay technical. But you've got to make that transition off of that. And when you start adding on those employees, that really starts the process, because then you go, I've got to know about healthcare. I've got to offer healthcare benefits. I've got to offer, vision and eye and all these other things. And do I give them bonuses and how many days of PTO? And suddenly now I have all this business insurance, workers' comp that I didn't have before. So no matter how small, as soon as you add on that one extra person, you're becoming more of a business person. And every time you add on, you're becoming more of a business person. And from a technical perspective, I know it was hard for me, and I know it's hard for every technical person out there who I just love the hands-on. And that's why we started our businesses, because we love the hands-on. We want to be in there. I love networking. I love setting up networks and putting together all the different devices and now with security and everything, there's so much more added onto it. But you're forced to become a business person. And that is not usually where our, qualifications are. I happen to have a master's in business, so I lucked out in that. But that doesn't really help you that much. I mean, it gives you the information that you should know, the knowledge. But when you're a technical person, you want to do technical work. And so it's that slow transition. I need to go look at more business. And then as you're growing and as you're adding more employees, then it's who's doing sales, who's doing marketing, and it just goes on and on. HR.
Yeah, HR was the one that popped for me as well. It's like, geez, talk about stuff that the average, technically minded, MSP or engineering leader or IT leader, of course they're not going to have spent, time kind of driving and owning those sides of an operation. So there is a lot to learn. Excuse me. I don't think anyone would have an expectation, like you're not going to go get an MBA overnight and all of a sudden become an expert in all these areas, right? And in some cases, maybe you've got access to a network that can help you. Maybe some of those contractors or consultants have, expertise in some of these areas, or maybe you've got some fractional folks that are coming in to help with accounting and payroll or some of that stuff until you can get a handle on it and kind of figure it out. But yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I don't know that I've ever met an MSP that loves letting go of the control, right? Like this is a very hands-on, folks got in this space because they were, tinkering with computers and breaking stuff apart and putting it back together and said, hey, I want to do this, right? I want to make a living out of this. So it's not an easy shift in mindset, but you think about all these different disciplines and what it takes to run and grow a commercial business. Yeah, you can't be, sitting hands on keyboard with all the nerdy stuff 24/7 and expect to also be able to, successfully kind of wrap your arms around those aspects of the business. So I think you're right. Payroll, HR, those are good early places to start because you're going to need you're going to need folks to delegate some of the technical stuff too. So that feels like a very logical
Yes.
starting point. Understanding the finance of the business in a slightly more meaningful way probably is another part of this as well, right? In the early stages, you're taking money from anybody that's willing to write you a check at the end of the month. And, you
Exactly.
probably don't have a super deep understanding of, measuring cogs or how much it actually costs you to deliver
Exactly.
service, because it's just you, it's my
Yeah.
time, right? But then you've got
Right.
employees and their time and billable hours and all these other kind of nuances that you want to start to understand. So it's it's a tall order, but I think step one, clearly, stepping back as much as possible from some of the nuanced technical aspects of the role and just gaining an appreciation for the other 75% of the business, and learning enough to be dangerous in those areas is where you want to start in this kind of journey or transition, for sure. And you also alluded to what I think is kind of next in our list, which is kind of rounding out some of those soft skills, right? You're never going to lose your technical. I think you're right about that, but you do need to be able to talk the talk with a lot of different stakeholder groups, and you need to be able to, build some amount of commercial success in these other areas. I'm thinking talking to employees, talking to investors, if there's, financial backing at any point in the journey, customers and clients. And yeah, of course you're already talking to them, but again, the more you grow, the larger the customers become. It's a, you're not just having a technical conversation or a QBR. It becomes a slightly evolved conversation, a board, if that's something that you're at the mercy of as well. So, and you mentioned sales and marketing, which I feel like is also part of this, because it's understanding how to talk to prospects and some of those different ways. So what are some of those soft skills, and how do I, particularly if I'm a typical, very technical, very introverted, non-salesy sort of, MSP leader, what are some tips or within these kind of categories that I'm rambling through right now, what are some of the key areas that I want to prioritize to kind of round out some of my soft skills so that I can be successful in starting to stand up those other parts of the business?
Sure. Well, I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to look at what your workload is like on the technical side. And one of the things that my dad always taught me was people are experts in their field for a reason. And that is relying on new employees or contractors that you've hired to be experts in those fields so that you can step away a little bit. So it might be at first, I'm not an expert in an exchange server. So I need to make sure that I hire somebody or one of my employees is an expert in this. So it's that slow stepping away from that. And then for the soft skills and learning the soft skills, it's again the same thing. I've got to go out and I've got to look for expertise. Initially, we're looking for external people, consultants, HR, big thing, even marketing or sales. How do I bring in good people that I'm going to work with who are going to help me and educate me in something that I don't necessarily know? I will tell you, accounting, bookkeeping, very, very big. If you get a great bookkeeper, which is, I'm going to tell you, hard to find. I have gone through various bookkeepers. I'm finally, the last few years, I've had some great bookkeepers that I've been with, and they help you learn more about the business, and you ask them a lot of questions and you can get things out. So these soft, kind of knowledge that they need to learn is first relying on other people for the expertise that they're in. And then going and I'm going to tell you this, I am not an HR expert. I'm not a sales expert. I'm not a payroll expert. I am none of those things. I'm not business insurance. But I need to rely on my people who are supposed to be experts. And I need to be smart enough about it to know and I know this is the hard part, are they giving me the right advice for my business or not? Because you'll get a great bookkeeper, you'll get a great HR person, and it might not be perfect for the MSP organization. You might need somebody else. I find that really big in sales is you really got to get a specialty in MSP. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight. You're going to find the right people. You might have to go through various. but
Sure.
make sure you have that connection and you have that back and forth that you can ask questions. If you don't feel that you can ask questions and someone can educate you on it, then don't use them.
Mhm.
A big thing that's even a selling point in my own business is I go to my clients and I am a big proponent of, I'm going to give you as much knowledge as possible. That's what I want to do. You might not know what all this networking stuff or all the security stuff is, but I am going to educate you as much as possible. I love that when I have my contractors or my employees who come to me and tell me, the experts that they're in, oh my God, I'm going to tell you all about this and they're going to educate me in it. That gets me excited and that gets me excited to learn more. So a key is really getting through, with your separation and learning to say, I'm not the expert in everything and I need to hire the experts. And then also learning that back and forth with that expert. And if they're the right expert for you, because again, I've been doing this for 24 years, they might not be the right expert for you.
Sure.
And, you have to figure out how you learn that. And I think that's the key for everybody. And again, it's the looking at what you're doing day to day technical and realize you need to slowly peel away from that.
It makes a ton of sense. And I like the way you're framing it as well, because I think something that a lot of MSPs can relate to, even if they're not at this part of the executive journey yet, so to speak, is we're all doing this when it comes to clients and customers, or we all should be anyway, right? Because this is still an industry as automated as it's getting. It's still totally based on trust and relationships and transparency and communication and the ability to have an open, honest dialogue. So MSPs can appreciate doing that sort of externally when it comes to customers and prospect conversation. Well, it's kind of the same idea, it sounds like, of looking within your own four walls and making sure that you're able to have those same honest, transparent conversations with internal staff or contractors, consultants, and also that there is that two-way kind of information sharing and knowledge transfer. Because it sounds obvious, but I don't know that it is for everybody that hasn't done this before. Like, you are hiring folks that you want to fill in the gaps that you have, because you're not going to be able to do all this stuff and wear all these hats and still grow a business. So, I think hiring is the importance of being able to interview effectively. And to your point, like, maybe you're not going to get it right every time, but trying to build some muscle that makes you better at kind of weeding out different folks and not just looking at a resume and saying, oh man, this person closed, $5 million in pipeline last quarter. They're definitely going to be the best salesperson. Well, are they going to add to your database of knowledge that you need? Are they going to share some of their playbooks and insights? Are they going to be able to, ask and answer questions? And all that stuff is so important. So I think, looking at the almost total profile of folks that you're chatting with and, trying to bring folks in that will, collectively elevate everything that you're trying to do across the business, and not just, live out on an island in a silo doing it on their own and not being willing to almost like the player coach kind of, persona or profile that you might look for when bringing these folks on.
And you can't be too separated. You can't say, because there's also that feeling of, they're the expert. Janice, you just told me, let them be the expert. Yes. But you still have to know what they're doing. Right. Just because they're an expert doesn't mean you don't have that communication, because you become an expert to find experts by having that communication, that back and forth. And that's a key thing, because you don't necessarily know what you don't know.
That's right.
The more conversations you have with people in those different fields, and it's not even with those direct contractors that you're going to potentially hire. It's having those conversations with other MSPs, having those conversations with people of other businesses. Who do you use for your, who's your business lawyer? That's another one. Really good business lawyer goes a long way. And I've had a great one for the past 15 years now. That goes a long way. That's something, again, don't just sit there and go, oh, that person, they're the expert. I'm putting on my blinders, I'm not going to listen to anything. And then something happens and you're like, well, why did that happen?
Right.
You still have to have the communication. I think that's important to make sure that people recognize that, yes, you've got to rely on their expertise, but it's got to be a back and forth.
Yeah. And I think part of this too, that's maybe another interesting point to underscore, is stepping into more of the CEO role. You've got to be able to really articulate like your vision, like where is this thing headed, right? If you want to be able to rely on folks for their expertise, terrific, then that puts the pressure on you to be able to, because you don't know what you don't know. I think you're 1,000% right when saying that. So I think where you solve for that is being able to clearly articulate what you're trying to accomplish when you're trying to achieve some of these certain milestones. And if you can articulate a vision and a potential destination or a couple of interim steps toward where you think the business is headed, then you bring in folks that have the right expertise, say, great, I understand where we're trying to go. Here's what I can do. And here's the value that I think I can provide that will help us kind of accomplish each of those, steps toward that ultimate goal, whatever that may be. Otherwise, you've got folks that aren't aligned, not in the same boat, not rowing in the same direction. And you might have folks that are very sharp and have a lot of savvy within their respective area of expertise, but it might not be and this is true of any company that has culture that's maybe misaligned or people aren't, on the same page. It just, it puts mud on the tires and stops you from really being able to kind of cohesively work together, and probably makes you less comfortable with the delegating, with the letting go and the other stuff that we've been talking about here, because you don't have that trust that they know what I want and are going to be able to help. Right. And not just do what I say, but that they're going to be able to maybe challenge my vision and poke holes at it and provide feedback as well. Right. But you're not going to get any of that if you can't clearly articulate it to begin with. Right.
Right. And people have to be afraid, especially early on. It's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if you hire the wrong people. It's being aware. Right? It's being aware that you did it. Right. Right. Exactly. Right. It's being aware that you did it, and what do I learn from it, and how do I move forward? Right. And it will, trust me, 24 years in, I'm still like, is it the right person? Yeah. What do I know from them? What are they giving me? What can I give them? You're doing it every day. But early on, you have more stress because you might not have the same customer or client base that you do as you get larger. Sure. And so there's a lot more risk. Well, I don't want to I'm going to have to pay somebody else. Now it's a contractor, an employee, and I have to have their expertise. And so if I get it wrong, and that's a big thing, especially with hiring, if I get it wrong, I'm going to waste a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah, it's difficult, but we've all been there. We've all hired somebody who wasn't quite right for us, even though we thought on paper they were. You get better at that as you go along.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So as we step into sort of the third, kind of pillar here, which I think to me really emphasizes a growth mindset, right? Again, early stage MSP. I mean, it is just firefighting, putting out tickets all the time. There's very little, kind of to points you were just making, there's not enough sense of stability almost to focus on scaling the business, because you're just running around dealing with 100 things. If you lose 2 or 3 customers one day, all of a sudden, the well is going to start to dry out because you don't have enough of that scale or maturity from an operating perspective to kind of weather a storm like that, if you will. So the hiring makes a ton of sense. The emphasis on starting to delegate, of course, the shift in mindset to start understanding the other sides of the business. What within those, when I want to transition from, maybe to simplify it slightly, from being a firefighter to a more of a farmer and grower of this operation, what does that look like in terms of my day to day? And if I'm asking myself the big kind of, $64,000 question, okay, I want to really start focusing on commercial growth of this business. Where do I look and where do I start, or what are some of the playbooks that I run to begin that growth journey? Because of course it's a long road.
Yeah. So that's a key area. And a lot of that is evaluating your services first. What am I offering? You could be offering way too much. If you're offering too much and you have no experts and you just have a lot of people who know generally a lot of things, then you're probably not going to be doing good.
Sure.
It's, when I first started, we offered website development. I wasn't a website developer. I contracted with somebody. It just wasn't bringing in the money. It wasn't my expertise, so I wasn't really focused on it.
Right.
Make sure, I think that's the first thing when you really start getting into year 2, 3, go back and focus on what you're making money on, but most importantly, what you're an expert in, because you will be making money in the areas that you're an expert in. So focus on those. The next thing is you have to focus on your finances. This is where it comes to critical small things like, what am I paying for my remote management tools, my RMM tools? What am I paying for them? I'm paying a lot, but are they, and then that's great. I have these remote management tools. They're really great, but I'm paying a lot. Is it worth it? Do I have to go back and evaluate? You start having to evaluate all your business. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be making a lot of changes, but between narrowing down your services and going in and making sure that your money-wise is more efficient. And I'm not going to say to be cheap. Don't be cheap. Because if you don't put money in your business, you're not going to get it back. Don't be cheap. But go in there and say, if I need to continue my business, one of the things that I did is I got a line of credit from my bank for emergencies. What if? It's the what if. It's my mindset is every client that I have is a client that's ready to leave. That's my mindset. Sure. So if you're not preparing yourself for a client to leave, especially if they're bigger clients, then you're putting yourself in a high-risk situation. So one of the things that I did was I got a line of credit for emergencies. Thank God I've never had to dip into it. But, think about COVID. If you have that, you could dip into that and say, we had this interesting thing that happened in COVID in that everybody suddenly had to go remote. And so we had a lot more business. So suddenly I had a lot more business. And so do you have the people for it? Do you have the hire? So that's where your, line of credit might be like, well, I don't have the additional income right now because these are all things that, are going to be coming in later. It just think about things that will give you that peace of mind that if I don't get A, B, and C, or the A, B, and C falls through, I can rely on this at least. But you don't want to do it too large where you have to pay back. You're so much in debt.
Right.
And that's the key. So when you're looking through your services, you can look through that and say, am I overpaying for this? We pay for a lot of block licenses when we're doing reselling. And I looked and I even evaluated just a few years ago. I do it every year, but off the top of my head, a few years ago, I was evaluating some email security licenses that I had. And I had a very large block purchase of which I was only utilizing half the licenses. And I'm like, why am I paying for 5,000 licenses when I'm only using 2,500? Go in, renegotiate with them. Yeah, no problem. 5,000 is cheaper technically because the more you buy
per unit,
But when you're only doing 2,500, there's that difference. That's what you look for. You look for all those different things. Is my phone system too expensive? Am I paying too much for this and that? Don't get cheap, but get efficient. And as you're doing that, then you can figure out all the other things that come with it. And you have that line of credit that kind of saves you in case you have an emergency. And it's, once you get your services down and those are your core services, once you know your finances and what you can save on, the next step is, what can I introduce to the clients that I already have and get a little bit more out of them? But that's where you've become a CEO. That's where you're no longer that technical person who's going in there and getting in there and doing programming coding or setting up scripts for the network or whatever it might be. That's where you're thinking as a CEO and saying, in order for me to continue this company and keep going the next step, how do I, when I have 2-3 employees, get to that next point?
Yeah.
And it's those little things. And you should evaluate those. Like I said, I evaluate them every year. I suggest people evaluate them every year, not every other year, and just see where you started something and then you maybe don't need it anymore, but you're still paying for it.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And of course, it makes sense to do this, as often as possible, which maybe I'll put in air quotes because that's easier said than done, like a lot of things in this market. But when you think of the rate of change in technology and the systems that are out there and what bad actors are up to and what kind of the broader, and what your clients might be looking right now, everyone's customers are coming to them saying, hey, can I use AI? Can I, you never know what the next thing is going to be that you're going to have to figure out. And you don't want to be 5 years behind the times in terms of evaluating your your stack and the way you're going to market
Exactly.
and things like that. And I also like the way you're framing this. Feels like it has almost a combination of defensive as well as offensive measures, which is an interesting dynamic. The line of credit and the idea of, as a CEO, building a little bit of resiliency into the business and a little bit of padding and cushion to say, look, we can't live in a world where if our biggest customer wakes up one day and has a bad experience and is ready to walk, then we're going to be in a pot of hot water and not happy with where we're at. So being whether it's line of credit or some of these other components that allow you to build a little bit of again padding so that you have that safety net, very smart. And then on kind of the offensive side of it, what you're starting to get at is, okay, now that I have maybe done some housekeeping and make sure that I'm not overspending here and that I'm not buying a bunch of stuff that I'm not actually utilizing over there, and we've sort of consolidated where appropriate and all of that. It's like, okay, I have increased the efficiency of my operations. Now let's take that and go on the offensive and look for cross-sell, upsell opportunities. Let's start going after more prospects and new logos. Maybe there's a vertical or an industry that we tend to do really well with that's specialized or regulated, healthcare or financial or legal, whatever, something that you can, differentiate against and really own and be charged more premium for, because those organizations have the budget and they need, that higher value service, because it's not just the IT, but it's all of the compliance and regulatory requirements that come with it and all that. And you can sort of shift from the defensive, protecting, building the moat around the business toward more, okay, let's go out there, let's land some of these new logos, let's cross-sell into existing clients, and let's do it to loop back to one of the first things you said on this bullet. Let's do it in a way where we're not selling stuff that we don't actually have expertise in, or that we don't have energy or passion around. I had a funny visual flash in my mind when you were first sharing that of like, we've all been to the restaurant that has like 200 items on the menu. And it's like, there's no way they're actually like making these things all very well. Like, it's just not, maybe Cheesecake Factory somehow does okay, but these places are not out there doing all of this stuff equally well. So I think part of that maturing mindset and part of shifting more to that executive leadership role is understanding you're not going to be all things to all people, and grow that in a scalable way. It doesn't mean you have to be the most specialized niche organization on the planet either, but you've got to find that balance, and you've got to find that middle ground so that you're not stretching yourself too thin and ultimately not delivering a lousy service experience to clients because you have sold against something that really isn't your area of expertise.
And the other part of that is, a key part of it is, when you start evaluating those things, especially when you get to up to year 5, you've got maybe 1 or 2, even 3 employees. Now you evaluate also the clients themselves.
Right.
How much time are we spending on this client compared to how much they're paying us? Are they break fix? A lot. I didn't start. I think I'm one of the few MSPs that didn't start as a break fix. I always had contracts, because to me, I always wanted that budget. And so I sold it to my client that, hey, I've got a budget, you've got a budget, we know what it is. But if you're in that break fix and you're moving into MSP, or you've got a combination, go back and start evaluating. Again, this is where, you're getting away from the technical, but these are things that your accountant can help you, your bookkeeper can help you. How do I evaluate how much time and money we're spending per client? Because a lot of people don't realize, for example, let's say you're charging a client so much, $115 an hour for break fix, let's say. And it's just standard PC break fix. And your employee took 2 hours to fix it, but they only put down on their timesheet 1.5.
Sure.
Or, if you're looking at it going, the employee might be saying, hey, I did an extra half an hour because I like them, I was talking to them, I fixed a little bit, but they, it's really 1.5 because of A, B, and C. You're looking at that as a business owner going, that's a half an hour that you could have been working for somebody else who was going to pay for that half an hour. You
do that 50 times and all of a sudden it adds up, right?
Right. And so it's going through those numbers and figuring out, is break fix worth it? It might be worth it for some clients.
Yeah.
But even with your MSPs, I have gone through my own business books and said, no, you know what? These clients really aren't worth it. We're putting way more time and effort, especially with the MSP contracts that you have now that are more set. And we set it by device. So you
Sure.
have to be very careful to make sure how much am I really spending, because it usually over a year's period, it'll balance out.
Mhm.
But you might have one or two of those clients that, cause the most havoc, and you're spending a lot of time. And you've
Yeah.
got to decide. That's part of it, is deciding, is that client worth my time and money? How do we manage it? If you do think they're worth it, how do we manage bringing those dollars back in,
Mhm.
and cutting down on the time? So
Yeah.
those are all things, again, as moving into a CEO, that you suddenly have to think about, and you could use the experts that you've hired.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we've all seen it, right? The customers that are spending the least per month often, or the noisiest, that are opening the most tickets, that are, need the most handholding. And I mean, it's tough, but it's part of that maturing the mindset of the business of saying, look, we're not going to take anybody that's willing to write us a check any longer. We do have a sort of the beginning of an ideal client profile, and we have a sense of who we're best suited to serve. And, in the same way that a prospect might say, you know what, thank you so much for your time, but it just doesn't feel like it's actually the right fit. We found someone else that we're going to go with. You should be comfortable getting to a point where you're willing to say no and walk away from an opportunity. Or if you have someone that, all they care about is price and all they can see is dollars and cents, well, that maybe is not setting yourself up for a successful long-term partnership if the only thing that they can see is the amount that they're writing on that check. Because they, right out of the gate, and you said this earlier, don't go for cheap. Well, that works in the other direction as well from a customer lens, I would say.
Yeah.
Don't go for folks that all they care about is competing on price, because you're not going to have the strategic partnership that you're looking for. You're going to have much more of that transactional relationship, which in most cases on the MSP side is not going to set you up for success, right? So don't be afraid to walk away from the table if it feels like it's not the right fit, on either side.
Right.
Okay, cool. Kind of two final related sort of pillars here as we get to the end of our list of 5. On the fourth one, I think we're really focused on building culture within the organization. Again, when you're a solopreneur, I mean, you are the culture. It's you're right. You're wearing all the hats. You're doing all the jobs. So I think this is another fun area that the average technical, leader is not waking up in the morning thinking about, how do I build and nurture a sense of culture within. I think corporate culture for a lot of folks probably feels like a bad word more than anything, because we haven't really thought about it in the ways that it applies to this industry. So what does that look like? Obviously there's leading by example, because people are going to be watching what you're doing, and you kind of sit at the helm of all this as CEO. But what does it look like to not just hire a couple of people and hope that they do their job well, but to build that sense of culture and communication and trust? We've talked about some of these dynamics, but how do I actually go about instilling that kind of sense of identity, or showing that this is what we want almost the DNA of our organization to look like?
So I think that probably most CEOs get it from something in their past. So I developed it from something in my past when I was working as a database administrator. And I remember I needed some keys for a backdoor password. And this other engineer had it. And I said, oh, could you give me those keys? Because I'm working on so-and-so's project. Well, just give me the project. And we got large amounts of money based on the project that we completed.
Right.
And I was like, no, just give me the keys. Well, you don't have the keys. It's not my fault. Yeah. And I'm looking going, well, we're all working in the same team. Just give me the keys. I had to go to my manager, who said, give her the keys for the backdoor password. So that was something that I wanted to make sure. And I instilled from day one that I was hiring employees.
Right.
We share information. We communicate. Nobody's going to hold the key to anything special. And what that does actually also is that helps for a lot of cross communication. So you've got systems people who will talk to help desk people. You've got, HR people who will talk to marketing people. You've got to be able to interconnect. And everybody, I always say, as you get bigger, especially if you have, let's say, a large systems and help desk department, nobody can be too much of an expert in one area. Yes, we want expert, but if so-and-so's on vacation, because our company is still not, hundreds of employees. So we don't have 5 or 6, I'm going to go back, let's say, I was going to go back to Exchange, I'm going to say Azure experts. We
Sure.
don't have 5 or 6 Azure experts that we could just pull from. So if somebody goes on vacation or they get sick and they're an Azure expert and we have a big Azure project we're working on, we need to have that cross training so anybody can take over it. And the natural communication that I built in my organization, which came from my experience, was we always communicate and we always give each other information. And I think that being open as an organization, that's something that I started, which I didn't even realize I was starting, which was based on an experience.
Right.
So I think that a lot of other CEOs can base their culture on experience of communication and trust. That happens to be mine.
And I like your anecdote because sometimes it's learning what to do based on something that's been modeled, or sometimes it's learning what not to do. And okay, I did not have a good experience in this, configuration, and I didn't like the fact that everybody was kind of keeping stuff close to the chest or trying to get, whatever the commission or whatever it was. And
exactly.
I know that when I have the opportunity to set the tone, so to speak, I'm going to do it this other way instead. I agree. And I think most folks have had enough jobs. I mean, I probably there's some amount of folks out there that have only been in one org and have worked their way up, but I think a lot of folks have exposure to a couple of different orgs. They've been a part of a couple different teams, or maybe if they've been in one business, that business has transformed enough over the years that you probably do get to soak up some of that experience and exposure along the way, and then decide, what you want to do with it or how you want to use it.
And it might not even be a business experience. I was just going to say that it might not even be a business experience. You might take something from just your everyday life and be able to apply that to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. I was going to add in too, I think another element, maybe it's not culture necessarily, although you could argue it's tangential. The idea of building process and documentation and standardization of some of this stuff is another part of this. Because again, whether someone is sick or on vacation, or I don't know, I always think of what if your smartest person just wins the lottery one day and it's like, sorry, Janice, I that's like, I just won the Powerball. I don't need to do this anymore. I'm going to go, buy a boat or whatever. You don't want all that good institutional knowledge to walk out the front door. Right. So you've got to make sure part of that kind of commercial grade growth, and maybe it's a little more under the scale column than this idea of culture specifically. But one of the key tenets around scale for me is, again, documentation, process building, whether it's day-to-day stuff, whether it's like DR planning so that you know what happens when, proverbial stuff is hitting the fan and you've got to be on top of it. That idea of being able to respond to the different scenarios that can come up. Maybe you've had some involvement in that as a technical, role earlier on, but now you are like that buck stops with you now for those processes and your ability to, respond adequately and swiftly in a variety of those different scenarios. So you're going to want to be on top of that as well to make sure that, you never want to be testing these things in real time, right? You always want to have the plan and go through your tabletops and all this sort of stuff so that you're ready for what's next.
Part of that is standardization. One of the big things that we implement, in order to make processes run and procedures flow more easily, we implement standardizations. So if we see a client, well, we tell our employees, if you see a client who doesn't have a standard, especially in our security, if you see that they're missing a standard, that's a standard security setup, if you see that something's configured differently, when you're doing something else, if you see something, say something.
Yep.
And then we'll look and go, why hasn't that been standardized? Yep. Where is it on the documentation? Do we need to make exceptions in the documentation that this isn't standardized because of A, B, and C? Because it goes back to your documentation. When you're standardizing and you have your process and your procedures, you have it documented, and somebody could easily take it and say, oh, I see A, B, C here. This is what happened. This is why they're an exception. Yep. We have a help desk ticket for it. We have a project ticket for it. And those all come together. But but process and documentation is a huge thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the difference between, having 100 clients configured 100 different ways versus having those clients configured maybe 8 to 10 different ways, and your ability to actually scale and grow this, it's night and day. It's night and day, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. As we wind down here, I think our fifth and final sort of mantra for folks transitioning into more of that CEO leadership role, and I think it's one that we've kind of danced around quite a bit, but you got to find the balance, and the learning journey never ends, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to wake up one day and be like, by gosh, I've done it. I'm the CEO. I'm done learning. I have it all figured out. I mean, you said, 24, 25 years in, you're still
Yep.
figured, right? That, I mean, that
Yeah.
it is a never ending journey. So as we wrap things up, what are some kind of sage words of wisdom or advice when I think about, finding that balance? I can't be all technical, but I also can't be all business, because this is still
Right.
a technical organization that I'm responsible for. And alongside that, I've got all these new dynamics to manage that we've talked about here on this episode. At the same time, it's a never ending journey, and I'm never going to be finished learning, particularly in this industry where, again, if you don't like where technology is headed,
100%.
just wait a couple of months and it's going to get flipped upside down anyway. So what can we offer to just sort of find that kind of equilibrium across all of this stuff that folks are going to be tasked with navigating through as they make this transition to an executive role?
So I would say find that thing that you love, that's
Mhm.
technical, that you still love, or something new that you love. So I still love networking. It's still my thing. But because of networking, I love security. I love
Mhm.
cybersecurity. And I'm even studying for my CISSP
Nice.
for the security certification. You can do that, and you could bring that to the organization and say, hey, I'm going through here. I'm going through all the standards. I'm going through all the NIST items. This is
Mhm.
what we should be doing. And then you keep pushing it to your employees. I want you to become the security expert. Do you want that? Do you want that as a job opportunity? Because I'm going to start it here and then I'm going to pass it on to you.
Mhm.
And that allowed me to bring in the new service, which is an MSSP.
Right.
And I think if you still have something that you love or find something new that you love, make that as your little niche thing. You can
Right.
still be you're still going to be the CEO, and it's going to make you a better CEO because now you're looking at it like I did. And I said, why am I not making this one of my core services?
Right.
We're pretty much doing 85% of it. Why don't I complete the next 15% to make us an MSSP? So if you keep that one thing that you love, you can be the expert in that while passing on the knowledge and then using that for the business, for the greater part of the business. And I think that's a good way to balance it, where you still stay technical. You can still stay technical. Because if you're, again, I said it from the beginning, if you step too far away, you're not going to be a technical person running a technical business. I mean, I'm going to talk to people and they're going to be like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Because I haven't kept up. You've got to stay in it. And if you can stay in it, even with one little fine point of being able to find that one technical thing that you still love, that's great. And you bring that to the business. You also have to make sure, obviously, that you still need to take technical, because when your employees come to you and you say, okay,
That's right.
you're the experts now, I still have to understand what the experts mean.
That's right.
You don't want to be
That's
too
right.
far, but I think that helps you, especially as technical people that really like that tangible thing,
Sure.
that it's kind of like, okay, that's the thing that I'm holding on to, and I could also bring
Sure.
to the CEO level. And
Yeah.
I hope that, people can all find their one little technical thing.
It's also just keeps you happy and lets you hang on to a little bit of passion and something too, which is fun, right?
Right. It's
Not
the
to
passion.
get totally, I mean, that again, I think this is an industry filled with passion among many other emotions. So it's nice to have that one thing that you can continue, latching onto and being a part of. I was almost picturing there, like the symphony conductor who's maybe not out down in the pit playing an instrument every day, but who still needs to understand
Yes.
how everything works and be able to bring these
Right.
different groups together and make sure sections are playing in harmony. And you just can't do that if you don't have enough of an understanding or keeping up with, what they're
Yeah.
kind of working on.
Exactly.
This has been a ton of fun, Janice. So I love our conversation here. Again, I think a lot of folks have gone through this journey or find themselves in this
Mhm.
journey. You start on the technical side, you're get into it from the nerdy, geeky side, like a lot of folks do, and then over time, whether through your own kind of will and manifestation and putting yourself on a path, or through happenstance or circumstance that give you an opportunity to be kind of thrust into more of that CEO executive leadership role. Kind of these 5 pillars to navigate and keep in mind, that the shift in mindset, rounding out those soft skills and understanding other aspects of the business, the emphasis on growth and scale and what that looks like at a commercial level, building and instilling the right company culture and sense of DNA so that everyone is working together effectively, and really finding that balance and being a part of that never-ending journey of learning and kind of continuous improvement. Sounds like a very strong framework for folks to be able to successfully step into that transition and thrive, more on the executive business side of the house. So Janice Mahlmann, CEO at August eTech, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share all of this awesome, fun experience and perspective and some fun anecdotes as well with us here on Synchronized.
Thank you. And I hope we helped educate some people or give them a little bit of positive uplift that, they can keep going.
For sure. I think we have. Okay. Thank you so much. That's going to do it for this episode of Synchronized, folks. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Synchronized. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Synchronized wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or visit us at syncromsp.com/podcast for more information. We look forward to guiding your journey from startup to scale up in our next episode. Until then, keep growing and innovating.